First order of the day for me is to express my condolences to the families of the victims of that air crash, the MH17 air crash in Ukraine, the families who were left behind to deal with this personal aftermath and tragedy. So my condolences to those families. There has been so much speculation regarding this crash. None of it actually substantiated by anybody other than allegations flying back and forth. And what I wanted to say here is that at such an accident site, especially in a war zone, takes on a completely different dimension from a regular crash, let's say, regular air crash, because it is in contested territory and the circumstances are unusual in a way, in that the territory itself where the plane crash is contested, by various factions, both by the separatists in that region who are defending their own little enclave there, and the government in Kiev. Now, the larger political implications here are obvious, and people should probably ask the question continuously: who actually benefits from this in political terms? I'm not going to get into that very far because I can already tell you my summation of this, but this does not make it necessarily something other than my own opinion, okay? As far as the crash site is concerned, okay, look folks, this is in a region that is basically farmland. You have the separatists that are essentially controlling that region on the ground, or, they're being contested at it, but the situation is that plane crashed in a field. The surrounding countryside, and it's all surrounding countryside. I mean, you can look at it, on Google Earth. And the enormity of that situation, with, an airline and crashing in a field with lots of bodies and corpses everywhere. And I can guarantee you this is a horrific scene. And believe me, I've seen the actual footage, the uncensored footage, and I don't much go over to LiveLeak to watch actual stuff happening, because I consider LiveLeak to be just the one more sensational bullshit site. But occasionally they get something on video that's uncensored, and that was uncensored, and it's not, I'm not saying you should look at it, okay? I'm not even recommending that. All I'm saying is that there's no way that this could be faked. And so, there's something to be said about looking at that kind of footage. I come from a medical background, so I'm not emotionally involved in this, and so I've seen some pretty nasty stuff, including forensic stuff, and so the images are not going to personally and emotionally affect me as much as it would a family member looking at this, okay? This said, I don't have any problem with getting these images out there. However, I don't believe that they should be shown, on national television. The images are extremely graphic, and even though I don't have any reservations about showing reality, you really have to make sure that minors and small children are not going to be exposed to this. unless you can sort of, I mean, I'm not talking about parental guidance here. I'm talking about extreme parental guidance is necessary when looking at the stuff. Which actually doesn't even take the actual situation into account, because that is much worse, being on the ground in such a situation. So, to make a long-winded story short, okay, the Western media everywhere is now blaming these people of looting the bodies, of basically compromising the crash scene, which obviously, yes, they have compromised the crash scene by a matter of circumstance. It's contested territory. On the other hand, the actual forensic investigator from the Dutch authorities who finally arrived there has said that they've actually done, under the circumstances, a pretty good job in terms of not in terms of securing of the airplane or the crash site itself, but at least in removing the corpses and preserving them to the extent necessary after 3 days in 88 degrees heat of being exposed and all this stuff. And so you have to imagine that the local authorities are completely overwhelmed by this, and that they did the best they could. And that the local population there, these people are farmers and miners, they came out to help. They're not necessarily even on board with the political ambitions of the separatists there. These are just regular people living out in the countryside. And they helped, clear the field, look for the body, or rather bodies of body parts. This is a hugely traumatic experience for any person with any human sensibilities. I mean, this is not like looking at pictures on Live Leak. This is the real thing. And so you have to imagine I guess most people can't imagine that, but it's absolutely horrific. And for these people to actually volunteer to do this, this isn't done for most of these people on the ground out of some motivation in terms of looting the bodies, or it's just preposterous, So, of course, there's going to be onlookers and voyeurs of any kind at any kind of crash site. But, you have to remember the difficulty of that situation involved there. And so, no, I'm not blaming the separatists for anything other than perhaps not being frank enough about what they were doing. Hopefully they had plenty of photographs there before removing the bodies, because that would really help in the crash investigation itself. But it won't tell anybody where the missiles were launched from, if it even was a missile, a surface-to-air missile. I mean, it could have been an air-to-air missile. Nobody knows. But what we're being told here in the Western media is that it was for sure, the Russians are blamed, Putin is blamed. This is all out there. It is blanket accusations without any actual evidence backing any of this up, other than insinuations and statements. I happened to read the entire transcript of the press conference, which took place at the White House yesterday, White House press conference, and reporters there actually, to my surprise, questioned, I'll put the entire transcript below, by the way, in this video, why the American public is supposed to believe the White House story, that they have incontrovertible proof that it is basically that the Russians were responsible for all of this. Now, it could very well be that they were, but there is no concrete proof of anything at this point. The Russians are denying it, of course, no big surprise. And we're getting into this blame game thing here. which is, this is what happens in international confrontations. And the United States government seems to be hell-bent on instigating a more and more aggressive confrontations with Russia. I'm not sure if this is the right approach to things, This entire geopolitical argument that the United States should remain predominantly in all geopolitical dealings around the globe is probably a big mistake long range. What we have here is the United States is essentially trying to maneuver Europe into breaking their economic ties and political ties with Russia itself. This is to say that the policy, American foreign policy, and regardless of whether it's Republicans or Democrats in office, this has been the case for at least 20 years, okay? They want to remain, the Americans want to remain dominant in terms of foreign policy all over the globe. They can't stomach the fact that Europe may want to make some independent decisions. They don't want an association between Europeans and the Russians. Heaven forbid they could emerge as some sort of competing force, which is what the United States government is trying to prevent. It's a mistake. So this entire incident, whether the Russians were actually training the separatists in the Ukraine and trained them in these Buk missile systems, as they say, even that is not proven. It's neither here nor there, because the Ukrainians on the ground possess the same missile systems right now. Who actually fired anything? None of this is proven at this point. And even if somebody comes up, I hate to say this, but even if somebody comes up with the actual intelligence proof, which, I mean, it was so funny during the press conference because the White House spokesperson said, well, we should rely on YouTube videos. Seriously, we should be looking at YouTube videos provided by the Ukrainian government, which recorded conversations between Russia and the Russian separatists. Now, you really have to, this statement is just so preposterous, it's laughable. So in other words, we're supposed to rely on YouTube videos presented by the Ukrainian government as incontrovertible proof that the Russians were behind this. Well, one could equally look as incontrovertible proof at Russian videos saying the exact opposite. So now YouTube, all of a sudden, YouTube videos become the ultimate proof in anything. And unfortunately, the whole thing is such a farce, because let's say even if the United States government now did provide actual intelligence images, satellite images of, the missile being launched, what territory, putting everything together, there's nobody here as a layperson who can even evaluate that intelligence to start with, those satellite images. We're all laypersons. And, they did the same thing during the run-up to the Iraq War in 2003, when they showed us satellite images, incontrovertible proof of aluminum tubes, And all of that turned out to be faked as well. So the sad part, excuse me, so the sad part about all this is it's coming down to the point now where nobody really believes anything anymore. And the saddest part is that some people, while remaining skeptical on all issues, like me, some people are now delving into complete conspiracy theories, which are so outlandish, that, I mean, you just have to do a head check. Now, look, anything that happens, even if it's an accident, let's say this whole U.S. government story is true. Putin supplied technical guidance and technical training to the separatists in the Ukraine and said, look, here's how you operate these systems and blah, blah, blah. It takes, by the way, 10 people to operate that. And they made a mistake, didn't know what they were doing, and shot down the commercial airliner. Now, would you call this an act of terrorism? I wouldn't. What I would call it is a military mistake. That's what I would call it. Now, as you recall, the United States military itself shot down a civilian airliner. People have forgotten about that, but that was also a mistake. It wasn't intentional. So it's very possible, like the U.S. government is saying now, that the Russians were involved in this, they did the training, and then it turned out to be a terrible mistake by the people who actually launched the missiles. That's probably, a pretty probable explanation for the whole thing. But instead, now we have this blame game going on. Now, for some reason, Russia didn't start a war with the United States because a civilian airliner was shot down of one of their allies. That didn't happen. And hopefully this won't happen in this instance either. In any case, all of what we're hearing now, take everything with a grain of salt. And to me, really, as far as the humanitarian situation is concerned here, the only thing I'm concerned is the absolutely horrific situation that the survivors of this airplane crash are facing, the members of those families. And they for sure are looking for answers, but they may not get any. I wouldn't, if I was in their situation, I wouldn't place much hope on it, except for the fact all we can hope for is that these people, once that plane exploded in the sky, were immediately rendered unconscious and didn't suffer for more than 2 or 3 seconds. So that's my video for today. And I'm probably gonna, I have a little bit time off here, so I'm probably gonna make a video regarding this entire Gaza situation tomorrow or the day after. And I want to say right up front that this situation over there is absolutely atrocious, and it's ongoing. So I'll see you later.